The entire world knew him as the world's youngest leader, but little did anyone know what he was fighting. All alone in the corridors of his palace that night, the suffocating and humid darkness that descended upon Ouagadougou like a shroud of mourning was about to swallow not just a geography, but the fragile hopes of a nation of in the corridors of the presidential palace, filled with the ghostly echoes of revolutionary leader Thomas Sankara's steps crying for justice. 34-year-old Captain Ibrahim Traoré stared at three simple yet deadly words glowing from the encrypted tablet before him. Dam, water, receding. This seemingly innocent technical report was in fact the cold steel of a poison-tipped dagger about to be plunged into the heart, the very lifelines of Burkina Faso. And in that moment, the seemingly calm young man began to feel the bitter truth that betrayal came not only from the outside but from within the most trusted walls, from his own table. This was a far more vile, far more insidious war than fighting terrorists face to face in the middle of the desert. This time, the enemy was not a pawn with a veiled face holding a rusty Kalashnikov. It was a white-collar executioner sitting in chic offices on Parisian boulevards, with manicured nails hidden behind the digital codes and international bank accounts that controlled his country's lifelines. The Kampianga Dam, the nation's largest source of energy and life, not only irrigated the fields and powered the cities, but also symbolized Burkina Faso's will for independence. And now, the water level in the dam's massive reservoir was dropping at an unbelievable breakneck speed, unseen even in the most brutal days of the dry season. This was no natural phenomenon. It was sabotage planned with millimetric precision. Traoré knew this was the new, most ruthless act in the relentless economic and political war that began the day he told the giants who had been sucking his country dry like leeches for decades, "It's over, we will manage our own resources now." But he was not yet aware of the triumphant encrypted telegram the French ambassador had sent to Paris. The game begins. Traoré's mind, with a reflex inherited from the Hell Week training in the Cobra Special Forces, instantly switched to the highest alert level. Panic was a commander's greatest enemy. He had to remain calm, analyze the data, predict the enemy's next move, and find their weak spot. "Colonel Diallo," he said, pressing the cold metal button of the intercom. His voice was calm and clear, as always, but the man on the other end of the line was the one who best knew the steel beneath it. "Bring me all technical reports for Kampianga from the last 10 years, especially all the contracts, technical specifications, and the full list of all foreign and local personnel who worked on that lavish modernization project done by the French company Technicore 2 years ago. On my desk in half an hour, and not a single word, not a single whisper will leak out of this room." When the room's mahogany door silently opened and closed, Traoré turned to the massive map of Burkina Faso on his desk. For him, this map was not just a piece of geography, but a sacred trust. He slowly traced his finger from the blue dot of the dam to the capital, Ouagadougou, and then to the rich Essakane gold mines in the country's north. This was not just a water war, it was a war for resources, sovereignty, and honor. The enemy aimed to break the people's will by cutting the water to kill the electricity, killing the electricity to crash the economy, and crashing the economy. Just then, a one-line encrypted message that arrived on his tablet via a special line used only by the Cobra unit turned this abstract analysis into a concrete target and was about to change everything. The message consisted of a name and a location: Jean-Pierre Martel, Hotel Splendid. Martel, the name set off red alarms in Traoré's mind. A modern colonial governor sent by Paris, with special advisor for infrastructure, investment, and humanitarian development in Africa, on his business card, a PhD in philosophy from the Sorbonne, wearing silk ties and crocodile leather shoes, speaking 5 languages, with manicured nails, and what a coincidence, he was also one of the most influential members of Technicore's board of directors. He had arrived in the country 2 days ago with purely good intentions to solve the unexpected technical failure at the dam and to extend a helping hand to the Burkina Faso government. Traoré smiled, a bitter and furious smile. The snake, after injecting its venom, had returned to sell the antidote at an exorbitant price. But the most shocking thing was that the snake's nest was in his closest vicinity, right in the heart of his own cabinet. The next morning's cabinet meeting was held in a freezing atmosphere, despite the coolness created by the air conditioners. When Traoré laid out the critical situation at the dam with figures and a cold-blooded analysis, the Minister of Economy, Ousmane Kabore, jumped up instantly as if an actor awaiting his cue. "Mr. President, this is a complete disaster. Our people will be left in the dark. Our fields will dry up. It's impossible for us to solve this complex system without the technological help of the French. Jean-Pierre Martel is the world's foremost expert on this matter. We must immediately sit at the negotiation table with him. They are offering us a multi-billion-dollar rescue package and technical support. We cannot miss this opportunity." The artificial panic and exaggerated haste in Kabore's voice did not escape Traoré's trained ears. This was not the voice of a statesman worried for his country, but the cry of a novice actor trying to play his given role properly, afraid of forgetting his lines. The steel glint that momentarily appeared in Traoré's eyes was the first sign that an impossible counter-operation plan, one that no one could even imagine, had already begun. At that moment, Traoré was not just looking at his minister, but at the masters in Paris looking back at him through the minister's eyes, and he was silently challenging them. Traoré decided to walk into the trap. But by his own rules, "You're right, Ousmane," he said with a surprisingly calm and conciliatory voice. "This is a national issue. We have no time for pride. Invite Mr. Martel to the palace for a private dinner this evening. It will be just the two of us. Let us discuss this matter in all its details between us in a friendly manner and find the right solution for our people." An expression of victory and relief, which he couldn't control, flickered across the economy minister's face for 1,000th of a second, and then vanished. But Traoré, with the sharp eyes of a cobra that notices even the slightest twitch of its prey, had caught that moment and already saved it in the most secure vault of his memory. It was at this point that Traoré made the historic decision that would pit him against the entire world. He would hunt his enemy not in their lair but at his own table by his own rules. As soon as the meeting ended, he entered Colonel Diallo's office with its tinted soundproof windows. "Follow Minister Kabore moment by moment, like a shadow," he ordered. "I want to know every step he takes, every phone call he makes, every email he sends, every person he meets, even the gas station where his car refuels. You will report even the flutter of a bird's wings. This is an order." Diallo nodded without a word. He knew what kind of storm was brewing in his commander's mind, and he was sure that when this storm subsided, many traitors would fall. The dinner that night witnessed the most critical moves of a modern chess game, where pawns are sacrificed and kings look each other in the eye. Jean-Pierre Martel sat at the table with the arrogant confidence of a grandmaster playing with white pieces, certain of a checkmate in 3 moves. "Mr. President," he said, taking a sip of red wine from one of France's most expensive vineyards, "we are aware of the gravity of your situation and how little time you have left. As Technicorps, we can completely renew the dam's entire digital control system, with a next-generation artificial intelligence that we will manage from our headquarters in Paris. This will guarantee you uninterrupted energy and water." Traoré's facial muscles didn't move. He listened patiently. "Sounds wonderful, Mr. Martel, but there must be a price for this generous offer." Martel smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile, but the cold, teeth-baring grin of a hyena before descending upon a carcass. "Not a price, Mr. President. Let's call it a partnership. A very fair partnership. We have just 2 small requests. First, that you transfer the operating concession of the Essakane gold mine in the north of your country to our consortium for 30 years. Second, that you expel those unpleasant guests in your country, the Russian military advisors, within 40. This was not an offer, but an ultimatum. This was a modern colonial decree. He would either have to sell his country's honor, independence, and future for a few megawatts of electricity and a few cubic meters of water, or condemn his people to total chaos, darkness, and famine. Martel thought Traoré was young and inexperienced, that he would crumble under this pressure. But there was something he didn't know. Every object in that dining room, the eyes of the antique masks on the wall, every crystal of the chandelier on the ceiling, even every petal of the fresh orchids on the table, had been fitted with high-resolution cameras and laser microphones as small as a pinhead. This blackmail was being recorded, moment by moment, and streamed directly to Colonel Diallo's crisis center. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. The secret file prepared for him in Paris contained not only this blackmail but also a potential assassination order. Martel let out the biggest, most contemptuous laugh of his life. "Captain, you truly live in a fantasy world. What do you have against me? Nothing. You don't have a single piece of concrete evidence." For a moment, Traoré's famous calm smile appeared on his lips. "Evidence? The evidence is in the phone currently in your jacket's inner pocket. In that top-secret message you sent to our Minister of Economy, Ousmane Kabare, 3 hours ago." Martel's laughter was caught in his throat. His smile froze on his face like a porcelain figurine falling to the ground and shattering into pieces. His face turned as white as the linen napkin in front of him. His hand instinctively went to his jacket pocket to destroy the evidence of betrayal, but it was too late. Traoré continued, his voice as clear and incriminating as a prosecutor's indictment. "The message says exactly this. Bait is set. The fish has taken the hook. Deal is done tonight. Proceed to Phase 2 tomorrow morning at 06:00. Apply full shock to the system." What does Phase 2 mean, Mr. Martel? To completely crash not only the dam but the entire electricity and communication grid of the capital, Ouagadougou, to pit my people against each other and create chaos. Martel was breathless, his eyes widened in horror. "How? That's impossible. How did you know?" he whispered. Traoré calmly touched a small black device on the table, no bigger than a lighter. "You at Technicorps installed a digital backdoor in our dam, one you thought our engineers would never find. We, in turn, installed our own backdoor, our own Trojan horse, inside that state-of-the-art encrypted phone you gifted to our traitorous minister, claiming it was untappable and unbreakable. We have been listening to and watching your every conversation, every message, every encrypted communication with Paris live for the past week. Hold on, don't miss this detail. You will never guess who the traitor minister was and why he betrayed his country. Minister Kabare's daughter was studying at the Sorbonne on a scholarship, but the scholarship didn't come from the French government. It came directly from a front foundation for Technicorps. His daughter was, in fact, a hostage in Paris. Kabare was forced to choose between his country and his daughter, and he sold his soul to the devil. When Traoré learned of this inhuman blackmail, his anger towards Kabare gave way to a deep pity. But that didn't change the fact that he was a traitor to his country. He was not just a traitor, but also the bait Traoré used to strike his enemy with their own weapon. Martel, like a trapped animal thrashing in a snare, made one last desperate move. "You can't hold me here. I am a French citizen and a diplomat. I have immunity. My government, my army, they will destroy you." Traoré calmly stood up. He towered over the seated Martel like a statue. "Immunity is not a license to stab a country in the heart, Mr. Martel." Just then, the massive carved doors of the dining hall swung open with a loud noise. "What you've seen is nothing. The real operation began at midnight, while the city was in a deep sleep. On a single command from Traoré, Cobra teams fanned out to different points in the capital. Simultaneously, another team personally led by Colonel Diallo, in a search of Minister Kabore's office in the palace and his villa, seized not only the receipts for millions of euros in bribes transferred to a bank account in Geneva, but also the original copies of the secret cooperation agreement he made with the French government in the list for the new government to be established after the coup. All the evidence was gathered, irrefutably. Checkmate. You won't believe it, but among the seized documents was a ledger of gold extracted from the Isakane mine and smuggled to Paris. And when it was revealed that a portion of the proceeds from the sale of this gold was transferred to some dark figures who financed the assassination of Thomas Sankara years ago and were still alive, the deep and bloody roots of the conspiracy became clear. This was not just economic exploitation, but the continuation of a historic betrayal. The next morning, as the first rays of sun illuminated Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré stood before the national television cameras. He looked tired, but his eyes shone with the fire of a victorious commander. Beside him was Colonel Diallo, and on the massive table before him lay all the documents seized the night before, the transcripts of the audio recordings, and the confession signed in Minister Caboret's own hand, detailing everything. In a calm but steel-like, determined tone, he explained the cyber, economic, and political conspiracy against his country, the vile role of the French government in the Technicorps company, the bitter betrayal of his own minister, to his people and the world without omitting a single detail. Last night, he said, looking directly into the camera lens, into the eyes of his people without blinking for a moment, neo-colonialism once again showed us one of its most modern, most insidious, and ugliest faces. They thought they could discipline us with our water, our electricity, our bread. They thought they could buy us, make us kneel. They thought every leader, every revolutionary has a price, but they were gravely mistaken. Because this land is the land of honorable people, and we do not have a price. Because we, like our motherland, like honor, are not for sale. When the speech ended, life came to a standstill in every corner of Burkina Faso. In villages and cities, people gathered around their radios and televisions, shed tears first of shock and anger, then of indescribable pride and joy. Within seconds, tens of thousands of people poured into the streets with Burkina Faso flags and posters of Thomas Sankara. This was the largest, most spontaneous public support seen after a coup. Traoré had not only foiled a treacherous plot, but had also forged the bond with his people with unshakable trust, an unbreakable chain. But Traoré's real strategic move was yet to come. He was not a leader who would settle for only defending and celebrating his victory. He was determined to turn this deep crisis into a historic opportunity for his country. Just then, the special, red telephone in the crisis center rang. The voice on the other end was from the Kremlin Palace, from Moscow. Traoré had been waiting for this call. A week later, as the world watched in amazement, Jean-Pierre Martel and the other captured French agents were put on a Red Cross plane to be sent to the International Court of Justice in The Hague, on charges of espionage and conspiracy against the sovereignty of a nation. The traitorous minister Caboret was sent to a military prison to be tried for high treason, but this was not the end of the story, just the first step of a new and bolder beginning. Traoré announced that he had seized all assets of the French company Technicorps in the country and that the control of the dam was now fully transferred to patriotic Burkinabe engineers. Then, he made the move that shocked the entire world. He announced that he had signed new, equal, and fair agreements with Russia in the field of cybersecurity and military technical cooperation, and with China in mining technology transfer and infrastructure investments, protecting his country's interests to the fullest. He had not only broken a colonial shackle, but had built new and stronger bridges of friendship in its place. No one knew he carried a nation's loneliness on his young shoulders alone, but he had taken the first giant step to transform this loneliness into a Pan-African brotherhood that would inspire all of Africa. As 3 Puma helicopters belonging to the French Special Forces flew low towards the border for retaliation and intimidation, on a single command from Traoré, the air defense systems of the Alliance of Sahel States (AAS), jointly established by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, were activated. With the support of Russian advisors, the helicopters' lock-on systems were instantly warned. Paris found that they were no longer facing a single, isolated country, but a united, determined, and technologically supported military bloc. The helicopters, unable to fire even a single harassing shot, had to turn back with their tails between their legs. This was the clearest, most historic picture of the moment the former colonial power's military and psychological superiority in the Sahel was shattered. Traoré had changed the fate, not only of his own country, but of the entire region. However, the greatest danger had not yet emerged. When the palace door opened with a loud bang, he saw his most trusted commander, his right-hand man, Colonel Diallo, standing before him. Diallo's normally rock-solid face was ashen, and the single-page intelligence report he held in his hand was visibly trembling. "Mr. President," he said breathlessly. His voice choked. "The operation was a success, but we've only seen the first layer of the trap. We have just realized the real trap, the real hell. The Technicorps sabotage was just a diversionary operation. The real target was—" Traoré snatched the report and began to read. His eyes widened with every line he read. As he read that intelligence report, he understood that those who had infiltrated the country's largest gold mine, Essakane, were not only French agents, but a sleeper terrorist cell affiliated with the Sahel branch of ISIS, collaborating with them. Their aim was not just economic sabotage but a massive plan of massacre and chaos that would plunge the entire country into bloodshed and start a civil war by seizing the mine and the hundreds of foreign hostages inside. The whole world thought the cyber trap had been foiled, but the real shock was the revelation that the Western intelligence service that set up this cyber trap was working together with a terrorist cell that had been dormant for years. Traoré was caught between two fires, in the middle of a two-front war. On one side, the neo-colonial powers trying every means to exploit his country's resources, and on the other, the ruthless, dehumanized terrorists they used as pawns. According to intelligence, they had only 6 hours left to start the terrorist rebellion at the mine and begin advancing towards the capital. The army's most elite units had been moved to the border against the French threat. The capital was almost completely defenseless. This was not just a military operation, but the greatest test of Traoré's revolution and his reputation before his people, before the whole world. This was his last chance. Betrayal, in its most bitter, most poisonous, most devastating form, had once again descended upon Traoré like a nightmare. This was not just a war for the homeland, but a story of a brother's barrel pointed at a brother, a personal reckoning, a broken oath. Traoré closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. He gathered his composure, his steel-like will once again. His options had narrowed, almost disappeared. He could either immediately withdraw the troops from the border to protect the capital, thereby handing the French the intervention opportunity they were waiting for on a silver platter, leaving the country open to the risk of an invasion. Or he would have to defend the capital with a handful of loyal Cobra commandos and VDP volunteers who had nothing but old hunting rifles, against a bloodthirsty army led by a former comrade in arms, a Cobra who knew the most ruthless combat tactics. In that moment, he felt the historic responsibility. The heavy burden he had felt the day he visited Thomas Sankora's grave crashed down on his shoulders like a mountain of 1,000 tons. This was not just a military decision. It was a decision to protect the soul of a revolution, the hope of millions. Then he reached for the intercom. "Get the helicopter pilot ready. We are going to the Essakane mine." Diallo's eyes widened in shock and horror. "Mr. President, this is suicide. You cannot go alone into a den of a terrorist army. This is madness." Traoré slowly placed the famous red beret, a legacy from Sankara, on his head. He looked at his reflection in the mirror. There was neither fear nor hesitation in his eyes, only the unshakable, deadly determination of a revolutionary who had risked everything. "No, Colonel," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I am not going alone. I am going with the prayers and hope of my people. And a traitor, a brother traitor, will be taught the meaning of patriotism best by an old brother, an old friend." As he descended the marble stairs of the palace, he remembered the small, yellowed note left on his desk. The note was found in the traitor minister's office, and it had only one word written on it, Sankar, and the signature under this word was the secret code name from the intelligence records of the man who had betrayed Sankara years ago and led him to his death. The danger was much deeper, much darker, and dated much further back than he thought. And he was walking, all alone, right into the heart of this darkness, this historic betrayal. As the flickering lights of the capital Ouagadougou remained below like tiny fireflies through the titanium alloy glass of the Puma helicopter, Ibrahim Traoré's mind was in the midst of a storm that drowned out the deafening roar of the engines. It was not a storm of fear, it was worse. It was a wreckage created by betrayal, memories, and broken oaths. He didn't even notice the worried face of Colonel Diallo, sitting in the seat next to him. His eyes scanned the dark Sahel geography, but what he was actually seeing was a memory stained with the dust, blood, and sweat of years past. Cobra Special Forces Training Camp, Po Forest. Years ago, the night was pitch black. Two young lieutenants, in the mud and exhaustion, were trying to pull each other over a 10-meter wooden obstacle, until the muscles in their arms gave out. One was Ibrahim Traoré, who stood out with his calm strength and analytical mind. The other was the bold, fearless, and the group's best marksman, the cheerful Amadou. Their instructor had given them an impossible task. At the end of Hell Week, one who couldn't overcome this wall with 50 kilos of full gear could not lead his unit. "Hold on, Ibrahim," Amadou whispered, his breath catching. "Don't let go, my brother." Traoré, with his last ounce of strength, grabbed the hand Amadou extended and pulled him up. When they both collapsed on top of the wall, covered in blood and sweat, they were laughing, looking only at the star-lit sky. That night, around the campfire, they had made an oath, slapping each other on the shoulder. Amadou had handed Traoré a small, hand-carved wooden cobra. "This," he had said, his voice clear amidst the crackling of the fire. "Let this be our oath. Whoever betrays this motherland, its people, and its honor, be it a general, a minister, or one of our own blood, we will inject our venom into his heart like this cobra. Is it a promise, my brother?" Traoré, clenching the wooden snake in his palm, had looked into his friend's eyes. A promise. Now, years later, that cobra's venom was flowing into his own heart. His brother had trampled on his oath and pointed a barrel at the nation's honor. "Mr. President," said Colonel Diallo, his voice muffled through the intercom, "it's not too late to turn back. This is a trap. They want to lure you there, create a leadership vacuum, and stage a coup in the capital. Please, this is not a personal matter." Traoré pulled his gaze from his memories and turned to the colonel. His face held a deep sorrow, the kind a father feels for a disappointed child. "You are mistaken, Colonel," he said. "This is the most personal matter it could be. The greatest enemy of a revolution is not the tanks outside, but the comrades inside who have lost their souls. Amadou is not just a traitor, he is a cancerous part of our dreams, our hopes, and it is my duty, as a surgeon, to cut that cancer out. Some wounds can only be healed by the scalpel that inflicted them." The helicopter landed on a rocky plateau about 5 kilometers from the huge, illuminated complex of the Essakane gold mine. Traoré and his 6-man Cobra team melted into the darkness like shadows. The plan was simple: infiltrate the mine's main control center, ascertain the hostages' situation, and create a moment of confrontation with Amadou. This was less a military operation and more a psychological war. The scene on the ground was like a rehearsal for hell on earth. The volunteers for the defense of the homeland VDP surrounding the mine were heroically resisting the terrorists, who were far superior in numbers and equipment, with their old model weapons. The air was a mix of whistling bullets, explosions, and terrified screams. When Traoré looked through his special binoculars, he saw the terrorists were using Cobra unit tactics. They were disciplined, organized, and ruthless. Amadou had taught them everything he knew. Traoré and his team managed to infiltrate the mine undetected, using the ventilation tunnels. As they moved through the metal corridors, they came face to face with mortal danger at every corner. But they were Cobras. The darkness was their playground. When they reached the floor of the main control center, Traoré analyzed the situation inside with a fiber-optic camera slipped under the door. Amadou was there, a radio in his hand, barking orders. Around him were about 20 of his most trusted men, and in the middle, about 15 European mining engineers, bound and gagged, trembling with fear. Hostages. This made the situation 10 times more complicated. It was at this point that Traoré made the incredible move that would stun the entire world and even his own soldiers. He turned to the Cobra commander next to him. "Give me the radio," he whispered. "Announce to all units, All VDP. Cease fire. The commander, in shock, said. But sir, they'll mow us down. Traoré's gaze was so determined that the young commander could not object further. A few minutes later, a deadly silence fell over the mine complex. The ceasefire order from the radio had stunned both the VDP and the terrorists. From the screens in the control center, Amadou saw the VDP retreat to their trenches. He frowned. This was an unexpected situation. Just then, a call came through on his personal radio. It was an unbreakable frequency known only to Cobra leaders. Amadou, my brother, let's talk. The voice on the radio stirred a rusted memory, a forgotten oath, deep within Amadou's soul. It was the voice of Ibrahim Traoré. Where are you, Ibrahim? He roared into the radio. Are you hiding like a coward? No, said Traoré's calm voice. I'm only 20 meters away from you. I am unarmed. I'm coming to you alone. Tell your men not to shoot. I just want to talk. Like a commander, like a brother. This was an insane gamble. A bluff. But it was a masterful move, targeting Amadou's psychology. His old honor as a commander, and the bond of brotherhood could be his weakest point. After a few seconds of hesitation, Amadou made his decision. Come alone, one wrong move, and the hostages die first. Then you. Traoré took off his vest and weapon and left them with his team. He ignored the pleading voice of Colonel Diallo from the helicopter's radio. He walked to the end of the metal corridor and stood before the huge steel door of the control center. The door creaked open. All the barrels inside were instantly aimed at him. Traoré walked in slowly, his hands open at his sides. His eyes were locked on only one person, Captain Amadou, sitting behind the desk as if it were a throne. The moment of confrontation was like a moment frozen in time. Two old friends, two cobras, two brothers, now stood on opposite poles of a bloody stage. Amadou's face was hardened by the years in the desert and the hatred in his soul. There was no trace of the warm sparkle that once shone in his eyes. Why, Amadou? Traoré asked, his voice carrying all the pain of disappointment. Why? Was this our oath? Amadou laughed mockingly. Oath? What oath are you talking about, Ibrahim? The one in your phony world where you sit in your palace drinking wine with Western diplomats? While I was bleeding for this country at the front, you were playing politics in the capital. I saw with my own eyes that this system is rotten, that it can never be fixed. Hope is an opiate, Ibrahim. I chose the truth. Fire. Only a fire that burns everything down can bring a new, clean beginning to this land. I don't believe that, Traoré said, taking a slow step towards him. You don't believe in fire, you believe in the foreign masters who lit that fire, who gave you these weapons, this money, this false ideology. Amadou, the French intelligence officers who promised you a clean beginning, the descendants of those who killed Sankara years ago. You are not a revolutionary. You are just a slave whose masters have changed. These words had touched Amadou's most sensitive nerve. He shot up in anger. You're lying. They are just a tool. The real goal is to destroy this corrupt system. Which system? Traoré asked, raising his voice. A system supported not by votes, but by the blood and lives of the people. A system of a people who are building schools, digging wells, trying to take their destiny into their own hands. Your fire isn't cleansing, Amadou. Your fire is burning the hopes of these people. Traoré froze. What are you talking about? Amadou smiled triumphantly. Oh, you didn't know? The one who first informed you about the sabotage at the Kumpinga Dam, who leaked the French plan to you, and who drew you here into my trap, was your own right-hand man, your dear comrade Colonel Diallo. He is a much smarter player than me. He's playing both Paris and you. After having you killed here, he will return to the capital as a savior and take power with French support. You are not even a pawn, Ibrahim. You are just a sacrificed lamb. This was a picture of betrayal beyond comprehension. For a moment, it felt as if Traoré's world was collapsing on him. His most trusted mountain was covered in snow. But his Cobra training had taught him one thing: never react in a moment of shock. Analyze. Just then, a single word signal came to the receiver hidden under his skin, smaller than a grain of rice. It was the pre-arranged code word, meaning the Cobra team outside was ready for the operation. Sankara. Traoré looked at Amadou. Sadness and determination were intertwined in his eyes. "Maybe you're right, Amadou," he said, his tone suddenly changing. "Maybe the biggest traitor is the one closest to us." These words momentarily relieved Amadou. He thought Traoré had broken down psychologically. But Traoré's next move was something no one expected. "But to recognize one traitor, sometimes you have to look into the eyes of another," he said, and took a step towards the tablet on Amadou's desk, which showed the live camera feed of the room where the hostages were being held. And then he gave the command that shook the entire control center, the entire mine, and even Colonel Diallo's listening post in the helicopter. Now, at that moment, the ventilation covers on the ceiling of the control center and the metal grates on the floor exploded simultaneously. As tear gas and stun grenades were thrown in, the Cobra team stormed in from different points. It was all over in 5 seconds. Before the terrorists could understand what was happening, they were professionally neutralized. When the smoke cleared, Traoré and Amadou were standing in the middle of the room, their guns pointed at each other. It was a dance of death. The final dance of two brothers, two Cobra. "It's over, Amadou," Traoré said, breathless. "Surrender." There was a crazed glint in Amadou's eyes. "Never. I will die, but I will not surrender to your fake revolution," he said, and pulled the trigger. But at the same instant, Traoré had also pulled the trigger. 2 guns fired at the same time. As Amadou collapsed to the ground in pain, his weapon fell from his hand. Traoré, holding his wounded shoulder, knelt beside him. There was no pride of a victorious commander on his face. There was the grief of a man who had lost his brother. "Why?" Traoré whispered. Amadou, holding his bleeding shoulder, smiled in pain. "Because you still believe, Ibrahim. As for me, I lost my faith long ago." Just as the Cobra team was handcuffing Amadou and taking him away, Amadou made one last move. He leaned into Traoré's ear and whispered, "That note? The one you found at the palace, with Sankara written on it. The signature underneath, that code name, it doesn't belong to Diallo. It belongs to someone much older, much more powerful, someone everyone respects, whom Sankara knew as his closest friend, but who was actually the first to betray him, General Bamako." Traoré's blood ran cold. General Bamako, the retired but still most influential name in the army, a national hero, Sankara's comrade. The layers of betrayal, like a Matryoshka doll, revealed a darker, more terrifying face as they were opened. He understood then that his war was just beginning, and the real enemy was neither the white-collar executioners in Paris, nor the deceived pawns in the desert. The real enemy was a ghost who had been wearing a hero's cloak for years, living in the heart of the revolution.